This is Matt.
This is Josh.
And I'm Bryan.
And today we're with Bryan.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
I know. Special guest Dude Cast.
We're going to have fun.
It's the Dude Cast. This is what happens when, it'll be no surprise, Jeannie and Jessica are traveling.
Yep.
They got a retreat in California,
That's
right? So when that happens, it's the dude to get together and do a Dude Cast.
That's right.
Last time we did this, or one time, Bryan, you just asked what we often talk about. Last time we did this,
Yeah.
Josh and I, we did like, I know one time we did Married to Hippie Witches.
Yep.
Like, what's that like?
Yes.
Nice.
And then
And then yoga, just like men in yoga, like our
men in
experiences.
Kundalini.
Kundalini yoga.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because sometimes the men that speak about Kundalini
Online
are if you weren't going to do the practice, watching them will not make you do the practice.
No.
It's
It wouldn't
not a-
help you.
It's not a
No.
good selling angle.
No,
No.
it's not. I mean, because they're already like knee deep in it, so they're like yogis doing it, not like regular people who are interested.
Well,
or
and they're the
curious.
influencer kind too. So it's like they're trying to get views also. So it's
Right.
like talking about sun in your butthole and like all that kind of
Yes,
stuff. You know, like getting real into it. you
Yeah.
know?
We have a Chinese version of this where there's definitely like, if I had had access to Facebook back in the late 90s, early 2000s when I got into my practices,
Yeah.
I would definitely have not gotten into my practices. Like, I would have been like,
Yeah.
you guys are
Nuts.
horrible.
Yeah,
I don't-
right.
I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah.
Not the best representatives.
Ambassadors. Yeah.
Ambassadors.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a shame too, because I was thinking about this. A buddy of mine who every now and then when we talk, he is like kind of dissatisfied with work.
Uh-huh.
And as I was mulling it over and I was reading last night, I'm like, he needs like a spiritual practice.
Mhm.
Like that would be like some juice. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And
Some
it's
tools.
like, how do you even be like, hey, check this guy out? And like, it's not a good selling point.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It is.
It's tricky.
That's right.
Before we get into anything, we should talk about the interaction I just had.
Yes, we need to.
And Bryan overheard it. Is
That was
right?
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the studio, we have a sign that says, "Presidents are temporary, Wu-Tang is forever."
Yes.
And
And it's in the form of like a like you would see like a Harris Wall sign.
right,
Yeah,
yeah,
Like
totally.
it's in the
campaign sign.
format, and it's like you have to double take because once you see it, you're like,
Yeah.
"Well, who for president?"
Right.
And it's like
if you weren't
Wu-Tang
paying
forever.
attention, yeah, you would
Yeah.
definitely do a double take.
Could have Cthulhu for president in a
Exactly.
similar sign, and it would work out.
Exactly.
One of my favorite T-shirts I purchased in the past 6 months. It says "Cthulhu for president. Why
Yes.
choose the lesser evil?"
That's really
Choose
good.
the greater evil.
Yes, choose the greatest evil.
I mean, I bought that before July, so
Okay.
that was just like yes. Now I'm like, oh, all right. So he walks in, and he's like, "Hello," and I'm like, just coming out of the bathroom. I'm like, okay, I'm here. I guess I'm on the desk until
Yeah.
Eden gets here. And he just points at the sign, and he says, "I have a question about this sign. Not the whole thing, just this part." And he points to where it says Wu-Tang. I'm like, oh, like where is he gonna go with this? He says, "Is this a reference to the Wu Clan?" And I said, well, in my head, I'm like, I don't know who that is. I
Yeah.
barely know who Wu-Tang
You
Clan
could
is.
assume.
I
Yeah.
could assume. I had no, like, I said this to Bryan after the guy left. I'm like, if you could choose anyone on the planet to describe some Wu-Tang Clan to someone else,
Not
it would
Matt.
be me. Don't be
No,
me.
not
I
Matt.
could. There are 24 metal bands I could wax intellectual about. Wu-Tang is just not one, and not because of any reason other than I just have not listened to them.
No, wasn't
then-
in the wheelhouse.
No, yeah. So he asked, and I said, Wu-Tang Clan is a hip hop group. And I'm just like, oh my God, I sound like such a
No.
dork.
Oh man.
And he's like, oh, so it is about the hip hop group. It's not about the whatever. I'm like, yeah, this is about the music group. He says, okay. And then he does like, thank you. Like almost prayer hands, thank you. And then just leaves.
There was a moment of like, I know who the Wu-Tang Clan is. Like, he got a little
Yeah.
indignant
Was-
about
yeah.
it. You know, he was like,
Like he's like, of course I know.
Thought
Like
you
that?
meant something
Yeah.
better, than that.
Something deeper.
But a little bit about who I am is I was sitting back here overhearing all this, and I hear you talking to this gentleman, and I'm like, well, I do know who the Wu Clan is, and I am definitely not going out there and talking. I was like, poor Matt's on his own.
when you came out and you said something like, oh, it's about like, you had started talking like you knew who they were. And I was like, oh.
Thanks, Bryan.
Really?
That's good. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I really could have used you. And I don't blame you for a second.
No,
Would have done
no.
the same thing.
I think.
But apparently he looked like Crocodile Dundee. is
Yeah,
what
he had
I
a
was
really cool
Yeah.
hat.
Yeah.
He was and it's funny, I was telling them that he's come so I cover the desk on Thursday, and he's a very particular looking guy, and he has come to the door like and stood in front of the sign and looked at it so like almost suspiciously, but also with a confused vibe, like, but never came in.
Interesting.
And so there must be something about Matt that is a little bit more welcoming, or like just he felt like this guy can explain it to me.
I can't for the life of me understand that. Like
today was the day.
It's so weird.
Yeah, you have a warm look.
That's right.
Yeah.
You do.
You do.
Which is shocking.
I want to ask him about hip hop right now.
I know, right? This guy knows about hip hop.
This is a man who knows his hip hop.
It's just so weird to me. I think Jeannie and I were having this conversation last week because we were reflecting on when I used to teach high school. Mm-hmm. It was like hot mess energy magnet. Like any type of frenetic craziness. Like my room was a hangout for a lot of times, but then also like there was a contingent of like teenage girls who were like just energy all over the place, and they would just sit in my room. And like I have things to do. I can't hold space for all this. And Jeannie got to witness that because we were at the same school for a while. Yeah, and she's like, "It's just your calming energy. You have that groundedness." Yeah, and I said, and it's not my appearance because I have resting grumpy face. I don't try to.
I can attest to that.
Right.
I can attest to that.
If I'm just like staring off and thinking about something, it just looks like I'm stewing. So I don't get it.
I think there's something calming about that, though.
That's
like,
true.
I
it's
think,
solid.
Like it's a solid sort of look.
It's paternal. It's fatherly. Like I think that maybe that's what they're tapping into. They're like, this reminds me of my father.
Yeah. He's just sitting there, like, kind of like,
yeah, exactly.
All right.
He doesn't want to be disturbed. He looks grumpy, but he probably has the answer.
He can hold it. Yes, exactly.
That was awesome. Yeah, so I'm glad that happened 5 minutes ago.
That is great.
Today is like, I guess I'm calling it Inspector Spotlight. Like it's like we're definitely interviewing more people. Yeah. This like second half of the year, we got a couple instructors. So like I love it. Once the women were out, I'm like, this is a good time to sit down with Bryan. Yeah. Bryan, you teach Qigong.
That's true.
That's right.
And have last year. So this is like
second
third program.
This is our third run of the level 1. Okay. We started with fall last year. Yeah. And it was a pretty quick turnaround, I think, and then we've really kind of settled into it and gotten into a groove.
Right. Yeah. It's always that like first run of anything, right?
Yeah.
I remember
it's wild.
Same thing teaching. It's like here's the first time, like we'll see how it goes, and then afterwards it's like, oh, I know everything how to make this infinitely better. So there's a lot of that. So I want to hear about your story.
Yes.
I want to hear everything you got to throw at us. Starting with Qigong, if you want to start there, like how did you find the practice, or how long have you had the kind of practice?
So it's an interesting kind of a story that always has to start with martial arts for me. When I was a little kid, it was Bruce Lee and the Karate Kid. Okay. Like that was my jams growing up. That and Ghostbusters, but you can't grow up and be a Ghostbuster. No, you can't. This is what I got.
You can try, but
true.
Yeah, I mean, I want to, but nobody will hire me for money. And I grew up on the Karate Kid. I grew up on Bruce Lee. And I got into karate a little bit when I was young. And, I couldn't break a board because I was like 7 years old. But in my head, I was like, okay, so I'm not good at karate and I'm never going to do that again. And so I kind of avoided it for a while. And then I kept getting called back into martial art. Like it's just something that always really, really appealed to me, and I thought it was cool. Yeah. And so by the time I was around like 19, I decided that what I really needed to do was be able to jump spin kick.
Okay.
Like that's what I thought was going to really get me a girlfriend. And I thought jump spin kicking is the peak of what I can achieve
that
in
will
life.
be the key to unlock everything.
And I'm not joking. Like that was the criteria. I started calling martial arts schools and I was like, do you do jump spin kicks? And they were like, no. And I was like, then I'm not coming.
Not coming. That's not going to do it for me.
Yeah, this is not going to work for me.
So why would they not?
A lot of martial arts just don't jump spin kicks. So for instance, like now I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, 0 jump spin kicks, but it's like one of the most effective martial arts on the planet today. Yeah. But no jump spin kicks. So that was out.
Less flash.
Plus it wasn't, you couldn't really do that up here anyway at that point.
Uh-huh.
But so long story short is somebody said yes. And it was a combination Korean martial art called Hwardo. And it was at the time, it's still around. Like you can still take this art. Wonderful teacher. I think I forget the Korean, but his master Littlefield, but it was under a guy named Ming Park back then. And it was like full contact sparring, lots of fun. You know, we got to like throw throwing stars. It was like completely dork martial art. Like if you're a martial arts dork, you'd love it. You know, we had like swords and jambos and so I loved it. And jump spin kicks. But so after a few years of that, I started branching out and trying a lot of martial arts because I was in it at that point,
right,
you know, and I was in my very early 20s. I was fit, so I could do
picking something up new like that was not.
It was fun, and it was like a stress reliever, you know. And so I tried a whole variety of different stuff. I tried Aikido. I tried some jiu-jitsu, not Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but Daido, Ryu, Jiu-Jitsu, just a bunch of different martial arts. And what happened was I encountered a guy who did Chinese, he called it Shaolin Kung Fu, but it was like a lot of different Chinese martial arts kind of wrapped into different, you know, he would do different forms at different times. And he kind of observed, because we sparred too, and he observed that I was tight. Like he was like, you seem kind of tense. You know, he was like, have you ever considered doing anything like Tai Chi or Qigong? And I hadn't because I was like 20. You know? Yeah, I was like, no, man, I haven't done any Tai Chi.
I'm still early in my journey here.
I was like, I'm not looking to like, you know, move in slow motion in the park with old people at this juncture.
Right.
You couldn't get further from a jump spin kick.
Yeah, you couldn't.
No,
that's right.
It was like the antithesis of jump spin kicks.
Yes.
And but you know, it was one of those formative times in my life. So I was at Cornell doing pre-law. And what happened was that I was stressed and I was tight and I could tell I was tight. And I would like wake up and, you know, like sweats and, you know, I was just in a stressful time period.
Yeah.
And so I did some Qigong with them and I loved it. Like I thought it felt so good to just move in this gentle, relaxed. And it was very simple moving Qigong. There was nothing like crazy going on. But this was now like the very early 2000s. And so I started searching the internet for like more Qigong. And at the time, there wasn't really much to be found. But in just outside of New York City, in South Plainsfield, New Jersey, there was this guy named Binhui He. And Binhui He...
The name sounds really familiar. I don't know if it's only from doing the transcripts of your class.
So yes, we talk about Binhui He a lot. Yeah, and he's like a whole chunk of the class. It's
cool.
Practices.
So that makes sense.
So my sister and I drove down and we went to, it was called the World Institute of Self-Healing. And it was this, it was like an office, like a strip mall office park in South Plainsfield, New Jersey. Ever been down there?
I have not been to that. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey.
Yeah, so it's like Elizabeth area.
Yep,
that's all exactly and so it's real industrial. It doesn't feel like you're going to obtain enlightenment in Elizabeth, New Jersey at all.
Expecting some sort of like peaceful type garden scenario.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and we walk in, and so like this Chinese guy named Kevin puts on a videotape. And it's Binhui He, like in a hospital in China. And he's like, you know, he's using his hands and he's like pointing his hands at people. And it's like talking about healing from cancer with Qigong. Wow. And I'm like, oh no. Like I was like, oh no. Like we just spent a lot of money and we drove to South Plainsfield, New Jersey.
Drove to New Jersey.
You know.
Gosh, darn it. We should have known.
And like Binhui He wasn't there. It was just this guy, Kevin Chen, who, by the way, I'm selling it in one way, but it actually turned out to be like everything I was looking for. So initially, you know, we're watching this videotape of people like healing from diseases with Qigong. And I'm kind of like, bummer, you know, this is not what I was looking for. And the people that are there are like really, they're like visibly sick, you know, and I'm not. And I'm like, what am I doing here? You know, like, what are we doing? And so Kevin Chen then takes us back into this room that's got no windows. There's pictures of planets on the wall. He turns the lights down and he starts running us through this Qigong meditation. So we're not moving. We're not like doing anything that you think of when you think of Tai Chi or Qigong. Yeah. And I don't know if it was the sort of cueing that was used or if it was the kind of group dynamic, but like I went under and I felt everything. Like
Cool.
and I was just completely blown away by the practice. And it like melted my face. I was so excited by it. And so we did that for, several days in a row. We were there meditating over and over and over again, doing the same thing. He called it the classic meditation. And it was based on a sequence of Chinese philosophy called the 5 elements. So you're basically visualizing or feeling, it's more kinesthetically feeling like a body part and then an organ region or an organ system. And you're doing this with different types of visualization to try to help nourish the organ system or boost the organ system. So, it's medical Qigong, but it's also like really clear that we're going into some deep spots in our body.
Yeah.
So by the end of that weekend, it was more than a weekend. It was like a few days. I was like, my whole life had changed.
Wow.
I was in,
so cool.
I was in this pre-law government program and I was like training to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. I was like, this is not what I'm doing.
How did your parents take it?
My father, my father's a geophysicist and he immediately quips. He goes, are you going to minor in witchcraft?
That is
the perfect thing.
Yeah.
Man, there are so many times where, because Jeannie and I had to go to Iowa for a long weekend because our program started. My parents live there now. So like we stayed with them and then a 2-hour drive to where the school was. And we were talking before we went out to dinner at a place called Viva, like Mexican food. And Jeannie says, we got to meditate a second time, do our TM, before we go to dinner. My dad says something like, "Oh, do you need to meditate to handle the high stress environment of eating Mexican food?"
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, right. Only dads can get you just like exactly perfect.
Yeah, they can say the one thing.
Oh
another one he said somewhere in that same time period is he was like, "You always have been credulous, haven't you?" I was like, yeah, thanks, Dad.
That's awesome.
But then again, I heard my dad once say that he thought any kind of like astrophysics was nonsense with math. So there's hard sciences and then there's hard sciences.
There are limits to it. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's awesome.
It's interesting. I mean, when you just said you did that first meditation in a group, I'm thinking of when we several times again meditated. We did it after our last staff meeting. There's like 6 of us.
Yeah.
And Jeannie and I there was like a checking or a meeting after we got trained. And there's something to be said for doing it in a group.
If there's a group, it creates like a synergy between the people. And you go into, in my experience, like people even just doing basic Qigong will go into like a really heightened state while they're feeling other people moving around them.
Yeah. Huh.
It's interesting. I don't know. Maybe it's like Isapraxis, like the mirror neurons start firing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
so you changed. So you went from pre-law to then where? What did you do next?
So I didn't really have much of a plan. I just knew that it wasn't going to be pre-law, and
that takes some bravery.
Well,
that takes some courage. Like as somebody in pre-law at Cornell, it's like there's a lot of expectations in that alone that it's like you've been working to get to that point.
It was a weird experience because I also was, and she was great, but like we kind of grew apart, but I was like engaged to be married to this woman who definitely was getting married to a lawyer. You know what I'm saying? Like she wasn't getting married to some weirdo of martial arts.
That complicates a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it totally
changing
did.
your path like that. Yeah,
yeah. So what happened was that from that point, I actually started looking into acupuncture schools because I realized like, okay, so what's the way to sort of merge this into some kind of a career that I can make some kind of living doing? And I knew martial arts was like, if, at best it was a kind of long-term proposition and I didn't see a lot of martial artists making a lot of money.
Making a living. Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's a tough life.
It's tough. Right.
And I mean, mind you, this was kind of like when the UFC had really exploded, but was still new. And so it was like to be a traditional martial artist in the era of the UFC is a declining, valued skill set.
That makes sense.
And so finding my way to acupuncture school, I kind of all at once, like it all happened in about a year, is I got a job working you didn't have to have a license at this time, as a recreation therapist at Qigong Addiction Recovery Services at the residential unit.
Okay.
And the way I got through the door was I was like, I want to teach Qigong. And they were like, cool, like, come on in.
Come on in.
And I was like, I want to teach Qigong, karate, and I think like improvisational theater was somewhere I had done like a class. And like any 21-year-old male, I was like, I should teach what I just learned.
I can do that. Yeah, right.
This is one of those moments where if you said, I went in there to offer 3 things, Qigong, karate, and guess the third one.
Yeah.
I never would have landed.
I wouldn't have gotten there. No.
Right?
Either.
And to be fair, I did not one single time do any improv in there. Like that was not a thing that happened.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And so I applied. They had just started the acupuncture program at the New York Chiropractic College.
Okay.
And it was like in its infancy. It was a Master of Science degree bearing program. And I applied and I actually didn't even like finish my undergrad. Like I was like, I'm done. I'm going there. And I had enough credits. So they were like, okay, and that was
Cool.
So, I mean, I regret that. All I needed to do was take some Spanish or something. And I just was like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah, no more of this. Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to my daughter and I was like, don't be like me.
Finish it.
There's a fine line between just go and finish and then like, this is not at all what I want. I remember I've seen kids I used to teach. They were like, this is like not at all what I want. It is killing my soul to go to school. I want to do something else. I'm like, well, how close are you?
Yeah.
If they were like,
how many credits have you paid for? And how many do you have to do?
If they needed 2 classes or less, I would just be like, just finish. Just finish.
Right.
If they're like, I need 3, maybe 4, I'm like, that's a stretch. And if it's
semester,
really not it,
it's a full class
that's
load.
tough.
But I mean, it was one of those things too, where I think I thought I was finishing. And then my advisor was like, actually that language credit that you thought you had, you don't have. And I was an idiot. So I tried taking Spanish at Cornell. But I apparently am not alone in that theory. It's like a lot of people are like, oh, I'll just crush Spanish.
I'll just do this one class. Yeah,
so,
right.
So Spanish at Cornell is like the hardest
thing of all
Spanish
time.
you could possibly.
Oh
So I was like, well, what would be better? So I was like, oh, I'll learn Sanskrit.
Oh my God.
And like I didn't know, like the guy, his name was Professor Nussbaum. And he was like one of the world's preeminent scholars of ancient Indo-European language.
Wow.
And Sanskrit is considered so hard to learn that it's like a religion to learn it. So I'm like, oh, that'll be an easy class for And so that was so hard that by the time I got to acupuncture school, I felt like acupuncture school was pretty easy.
Pretty chill.
Just come out of Sanskrit.
Wow.
Anyway, long story short is once I got to acupuncture school, I was hired pretty quickly to be a Qigong teacher for the acupuncture college.
Oh,
because
cool.
they, they recognize Ben Hui He as a pretty serious authority in that world. And I never really looked back. I got my acupuncture license, started practicing, and that was how it was through the college that I met my now and forever teacher, whose name is Tom Bizio. And Tom Bizio is one of the world's preeminent Baguazhang practitioners. Baguazhang is a Chinese internal martial art, similar to like Tai Chi Chuan, but it's much more martial, like it's an art that's still very alive that way. It's based on Taoist circle walking. So you're walking the circle while changing direction in a pattern that loosely resembles the I Ching. So the 8 changes. And so it's like this Chinese philosophy informed martial art where you actually get to throw each other. And I was like, I'm in love.
This is exactly. Yeah, right. Perfect.
And then the other martial art, I actually didn't start with Baguaz. I started with a different martial art called Xingyi Chuan under him, which is form intention boxing. And Xingyi Chuan is also an internal martial art. And both of them require you to do extensive, we call it Neigong, but Neigong and Qigong are basically the same thing. To a degree, like Qigong is a new word. The Chinese have started using that since like the 20th century.
Really?
But historically, like a Neigong or internal work would be a sort of a movement practice or a focused mind, breath, coordinated sort of an exercise that would train you to do something. So you could do like Neigong to become good at chopping vegetables with a knife, right?
Awesome.
Anytime you do like really mindful practice of something, you're basically doing Neigong.
Cool.
So both martial arts have a lot of Neigong, like a lot of both movement and posture based, like standing posture based Neigong. And I mean, I really have not stopped since. Like that's been the driving force of my career and life since.
It's amazing. I like it.
Sorry so there was an intermediary thing that I forgot about. Is I actually started with Undertom. The way I met him was through orthopedic medicine training.
Oh, okay.
So it was a lineage called Zhenggu Tuina, which is also something that has a lot of Qigong in it because you have to learn to develop the hand strength and the body mechanics to do the medicine.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Cool.
And so meeting him that way and then I was like, this guy is the first guy I've ever met who actually has this sort of real, authentic Chinese internal development, who also can apply it. And he can explain how he can apply it.
Cool.
And so he was really, and still is, the kind of full package of what I would hope to find in a teacher.
Wow.
That's
and
so
that's all.
cool.
Was it the chiropractic?
So no,
College or
I
around-
had to go down
you-
to New York City to train
Okay.
with them.
Got it.
Yeah, and it was like very much. We would go down often one weekend a month or 2 weekends a month. So for about a decade, I was going down there
Wow.
at least once a month to train,
That's so cool.
and they were intensive. They were like 10-hour days.
Yeah.
We would do retreats where we would be together for like 10-hour days for like 7 days in a row. It was awesome. It was some of the most fun I've ever had in my
That
life.
is cool, man. Every time I hear someone say something about like retreat, something, I feel like I am not escaping this. This is going to be my future soon.
Yeah.
Mainly because Jeannie will not let me spend another day not having done some cyber retreat. I do like how you you're describing something. You're like, I like the philosophy. I like the practice. Is there an option I can throw my classmates?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, yes. Sign me up.
That's really cool. And when you say more martial, what does that mean?
So, one of the things, like you guys have both seen Tai Chi at some
Yeah.
point or another, and I love Tai Chi. I've done Tai Chi under 2 different Chinese teachers, Zhang Ke and Lu Lao Shi, Yang and Chen style, respectively. And both of them could fight. Like they were able to utilize those movement patterns to execute a movement that could potentially like put somebody on the ground or hit them or kick them, But generally speaking, when you're doing Qigong, Tai Chi, those types of things, they've been almost entirely disconnected from their martial backgrounds, even if they're a martial Qigong, which is good. I mean, like people coming to Yoga Farm to learn Qigong from me are
Right.
not really, I've not noted anybody like, hey, how could I throw somebody with this? But like if you're kind of a knucklehead like I am, and you're coming from a martial background, that's a huge draw for the
Got it.
Qigong world.
Okay, I understand.
And, a lot of it is like an illusion of something mystical, which the Chinese are more than happy to cultivate.
Right.
It's like, you can develop cheap. Well, you guys, I think are around I know you're at least around like you remember on the back of comic books and they had those ads where you could get sea monkeys, you could get.
Oh, yeah.
So do you remember the one that said, develop chi power, disarm a man without touching him? Like that was an ad on the back of the comic book.
Uh-huh.
And I remember looking at it that like back in my more credulous days, like, yeah. So, I mean, like who doesn't want that?
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Now, what is the difference between? You're saying Tai Chi? Is that Tai Chi? Is it or?
So like you'll see it written. So there's this different ways of transliterating Chinese, which you've actually had to encounter now because you like doing so like the original sorts of ways that it was transliterated in the West. It would have been written Taichi with like a little, sometimes with an apostrophe, sometimes without. And that was Wade Giles' system.
Oh, okay.
The modern system is more accurate, but you have to learn different sounds based on letters. So the way that you actually say Tai Ji Chuan, it's not chi like QI, which makes it ch sound. It's ji, which Tai Ji means grand ultimate. Is what it means, or like ultimate polarity. And then Chuan means boxing. So Tai Chi Chuan means ultimate polarity boxing.
Okay.
It often gets
Sounds
shortened.
so cool.
Doesn't it? I mean, it's like so dope.
It sounds so cool. Like it's like that is like
it's so cool.
How could you not be excited if you know the definition? You're like, all right, that sounds like.
I mean, I'm
perfectly
still
for me.
hooked. Like you got me just on the name alone. You know?
I mean, every time I look, I see Josh. I think you and I are about to like go into Qigong and just like we're just gonna watch some of these classes.
Yeah,
and, like,
just
check some of this out.
Dude,
throwing
anytime you
Francine
guys come, and before you know it, we'll be throwing.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeannie and Jessica come in the studio. Like,
Yeah.
why are there pads on
What's
the floor?
going on in here?
It wouldn't be the first time in my life that I kind of drove everything towards the martial arts. I mean, I remember I used to teach Bagua in this beautiful art studio, and it had like these tapestries and like really, really nice hanging things, and they were big. And, you know, I had all these young kind of knucklehead dudes in there, and we'd be kind of blasting each other across the room. And the fear was that we were going to like accidentally go through one of the pieces of artwork. And like I remember the woman who was renting to me came to a class, and she was really excited about the class for like the first 3 classes. And then we did some applications, and she was like, wait this
what?
is a martial art? Like, what do we do? Oh my God. You know, she was horrified.
Oh my gosh.
There's going to be a me-shaped hole in that tapestry.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh my God.
She didn't kick us out though, so that was cool.
Good. Yeah. Small victories.
Yeah. And you have traveled to China?
Yes.
Talk about that.
So China was an incredible. I was very fortunate to get to go to China basically on the college's dime.
Oh,
yeah, the
amazing.
acupuncture college sent me to China with students and other faculty. And so in China, the primary purpose of us being there was to have students do hospital rounds for acupuncture and herbs and Tui Na, which is Chinese manual therapy or body work.
Cool.
And so we did a lot of that, and we did a lot of good eating. But I got to work with this fella named Lu Lao Shi, who he's a Chen style Tai Chi Chuan teacher. And so every morning we would get up at 6 and we learned this relatively short form. It wasn't like one of the longer forms, but I think we were one of the first times he had like a class come that was really, really well-trained martial artists. Mm-hmm. So he had fun with us. Like he was throwing us around on concrete and like, and he clearly was kind of like, oh, cool, I can handle you guys. Sick, you know, like this is a good crowd, you know. And so that was a blast. But all of the training we did in China was very validating because like one of the things when you're an American acupuncturist is like unless you like really get to know Chinese, you essentially are bound to like English translations of stuff. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's like this game at telephone where it's like some white dude has, you know, decided that he is the master of some lineage and he's teaching you this stuff and you don't know if it works or not because we don't kill each other with swords anymore, you know? And so you're kind of like, yeah, I think it might work, but I don't know, you know? And so when you go to China, you see it being done. Like acupuncture, for instance, is a hospital-based, you know, medical profession there, and they're doing 100 patients a morning, you know, and you're seeing people walk in there or not walk in there with, you know, serious neurological conditions, and they're doing what you would do, you know, they're doing normal acupuncture that you learned in school. And then people, you know, the difference is they're getting like 2 treatments a day for 10-day rounds, and they're getting like, some of it's pretty nuts. Like they're getting like herbal medicine in IVs in some of the hospitals. Wow. They're doing acupuncture surgical techniques like threading. It gets pretty wild, but and then on the martial end, you get to see really high level Chinese martial arts, you know, and that's cool. Not that I've been blessed. I mean, Tom Bizio was a world champion in a Filipino stick fighting martial art.
Wow.
And then he became basically the president of this association called Pang Shudo, which was a Taiwanese lineage that had Xingyi and Bagua and I believe Taiji in it. And then he ended up forming relationships with Chinese teachers in the mainland in Beijing and kind of developed those lineages. But Tom is really, I mean, in North America, there's a handful of people that have real authentic, you know, lineage martial arts training, and he's one of them and can transmit it, you know, can teach it.
It's so interesting that the limit in the language, it makes so much sense. And that was one of the biggest questions that I would have for you is like, so when do you speak like how much?
Yeah. So like I mean,
because I can understand that being really difficult. Mostly what you're learning is like the language, you know, like a lot of it to start.
How was it compared
without the building blocks? It must be like very
How
difficult.
is your Chinese compared to your Spanish?
So let me put it to you this way. So like I did Spanish in what, like middle school and high school, right?
Yeah.
And I have tried really hard. Like I've taken classes, bought lots of courses, books, practiced with my office mate was a Chinese doctor who, was gracious enough to try to help me and would talk to me. I would say that if you handed me a newspaper, not just in Spanish, but any other language, like that, unless it was in like Cyrillic or another, Asian script or something, any other language, I would read it better than I could read it in Chinese. Wow. Like I'll give you a sense of perspective is I remember I had this, it was like a news article as part of a workbook. And I got stuck on a word and I'm running it through this app that's like a dictionary and the dictionary can't figure it out. And so I'm like, God, and so I take it to this Chinese doctor and she looks at it for like 0.03 seconds. So here's what the word looks like to me. There's a radical and the radical is like God, way, something like that. Then the next piece of the character is partially a heart. It's like shin, it means, to pump or to heart. And then the third was breath, spit, or vomit. All right. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, God, vomit, and like I got nothing. And the dictionary's got nobody's got nothing. She looks at it for 0.3 seconds and she's like, it's an air compressor. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I was like, I can't learn Chinese written,
Right. I mean, because it's like not, it's
just hard.
It's hard because it's like you can't sound out the word, right?
No,
it's like, I can't really speak German, but like since the letters are the same, I could kind of sound it out. But I mean, any Asian language like that, no way.
There's no cognates. There's not even really much shared cultural. Like I remember.
Well, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
It's like if it's based on that, then it's like, and you don't have the cultural references. It's like you could never know what the translation would be.
It's really amazing. I mean, like there are lots of people who do it. They become scholars of the language and they learn how to, and not just read like modern Chinese, but also like classical Chinese. Yeah. And like, so there are a lot of really wonderful linguistic programs geniuses out there. I am not one of them, but so like I asked a Chinese cop to kiss me. I got lost.
Who hasn't?
Yeah. I mean, and let me tell you something. Like Beijing cops are not like cops you want to tangle with.
No.
They're more like military, like operator style cops. Yeah. And so like I'm lost in Beijing and I'm sort of like, I go up to this police officer and I had mastered how to say, excuse me, may I ask you a question? Or so I thought. So the way that you're supposed to say it is, Duibuqi Qing Wen, like you're yelling at him, Wen, like, hard falling tone, ordering, dictatorial. And I don't talk to cops like that ever.
No.
So like if a cop pulls me over, I'm like, hello, sir.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm talking to this cop. The cop already is scaring me a little bit. Like he's very wiry, So I say Duibuqi and he's like, and I go, Qing Wen. And he was like, he steps back, and I swear to God, he had a little glint of a smile in his eye, like, I'm gonna get to beat a white dude today. And
he just messed up.
Yeah. He was just kind of like, all right, if that's the kind of game you want to play, And I'm like, whoa. So I'm, my hands are here. I'm like, and I stop and I think, and I'm like, I actually visualized, like, I put a slashing sign down, and I went, when. Like Qing Wen. And he was like, oh, yeah, what? And I was like, I'm lost,
Oh my gosh.
And so I didn't know what I had said to him, but the way he responded was like aggressive, Yeah. And so I go to one of the doctors at the hospital who had really great English, and she was chill. And I was like, hey, what does it mean if I say to you, Qing Wen? And she blushes and she's like, it's asking me to kiss. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So like, it's really easy to screw things up over there.
Oh my God. I can imagine. That's like, oh my Lord. It's so interesting because I was telling Francine, she is a friend who grew up in China and then moved to New York City in high school. And so she was, as an American who knows almost no Chinese people. Like I didn't grow up with any influence at all. We're only, I think in America, we're given pretty little truth or like any kind of window into what China is like at all. Like really, other than like propaganda stuff.
Or that like is mystical.
Yeah, things that are just so less connected to reality. It feels like, like where it's
Totally.
like, and for whatever reason, making it seem like they're against us. Like that was like kind of like
Yeah.
the American, we're strong, they're strong. Like whose culture wins? Communism versus capitalism. Like
it's really interesting to go there too for that reason.
Yeah.
Because like one of the things that like when I went last, it was Trump was president,
Mhm.
and so I was kind of really intrigued. Like I was like, so what do you guys think of Trump? And they were like, we don't give a shit. Like they were like what are you
Who
talking
cares?
about? Like
Yeah.
why do you think we care about your president? You know?
Exactly.
Like, and
Yeah.
like the Chinese people were literally like, do you watch news? Like that's dumb, yeah, they're like, we like to get good food and like our iPhones work real good. Like
Yeah.
we're happy. We're
We don't
not really
care.
looking to talk about the news with you.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and that's the thing. It's like I know anyone who I've ever talked to who had a chance to go there is like it's amazing.
It
It's
is
like a
awesome.
very cool in so many different ways than you could even imagine.
And there is like you feel the presence, I think, of a different form of governance while you're there, but it doesn't feel like you're going to a place where you're being watched or there's like I mean, there's too many people there. You're not really
right.
Like they're not interested in you. Like if you go and try to spread democracy, you might have a problem. But like
that would happen pretty quick.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Not recommended.
How many times have you been to China?
So that was the big one, was going to, and then everything else has been done in New York City.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I had the opportunity to go to China, but it was one of those things where my kids were young and I didn't want to.
It's a big trip.
And we were gone for like a month,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I can say I will go to China again. That's for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those places where I could go to Western Europe like by myself and like navigate it and be okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't go anywhere in Asia by myself. I would need
No, you need help.
some sort of guide, some sort of group or something to navigate. Did you have trouble? I mean, aside from the kissing a cop story, like how was it? Like,
so Beijing was like any big city.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah,
you were, like, big
Beijing was
city?
pretty easy actually. And once you get the hang of where you are and how to, navigate it, then I mean, I will say that like taking the train in Beijing is an experience. Like the train station is just, everything is so much bigger than you can really visualize. So like you go to the Forbidden City, like everybody has seen the Forbidden City.
Yeah.
But when you actually get there, it's like gargantuan, and there's not maybe millions, but there's like definitely thousands upon thousands of humans that are just going in every direction all at once. So it's like, trying to find your way around in there without a tour guide, you could spin your wheels and get really lost a lot. I mean, we did, like there was quite a bit of getting lost and sort of like, so one fun moment was there's a famous place where you can get Peking duck in Beijing. And it's in what's called a hutong, which is like an old style neighborhood.
Okay.
And they're very like cool. It looks like old China, it looks like something you've seen in a movie.
Yeah.
But they're also like not as tourist friendly sometimes. It's not that they're dangerous or not friendly, but it's just like it's not designed for tourists.
Yeah.
And so like my buddy and I start walking generally in the direction. We had like printed out directions, We start walking generally in the direction. We get what I perceive to be hopelessly lost, And he's like got the map. He's like trying to read the Chinese. He's using his phone to like translate the Chinese. And finally I turned to this elderly couple that was walking by. And I didn't really know too much Chinese, but I knew the word for duck and I knew how to say hello. So I said, "Hello, duck." And in Chinese. And they were like, "Oh yeah. We know what you're talking about." And they like took us to the duck place.
Oh, that's cool.
And so like you can get around, if you ask young people, like anybody under the age of like 20, they will usually speak English in China.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But yeah, there were definitely parts of China where like you could be the first white person that village has had in a minute, or if ever, like if you go deep enough into a rural area.
Right. Did you what else did you see outside of like Beijing?
So we spent most of our time in a town called Hangzhou, which is like a smaller city in China of merely 10 million people.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's like New York City, but it's like a smaller city. Beijing has like 35 million documented people. Shanghai has like 40 million documented
Holy
people.
cow.
And that doesn't even count the undocumented people that are there. So Hangzhou is like this beautiful kind of mountainous town, and it was where Mao liked to vacation. So it's like very gorgeous southern city,
cool,
kind of balmy and hot. And then we spent time on the Yellow Mountain, so Huangshan Mountain. We did a lot of hiking around, and
that sounds beautiful.
It was awesome. Yeah, it was a great trip.
That's cool.
I'm super grateful for it.
Holy cow! Yeah, New York City population 8.26 million.
Think of that.
Like,
oh my God.
Yeah.
40 million. Like you said, I literally cannot
Beijing
imagine
is
it.
so big. So Beijing is built with like rings of traffic around it.
Okay.
And those traffic rings contain some of the greatest traffic jams on the face of the planet in human history.
How long does it take? Like, what's like the crazy?
I mean, like I never had a good sense of how far we were traveling because the traffic was so ridiculous that like you could be going like a couple blocks and, it'd take hours sometimes.
Yeah. When I went to Indonesia, it was a similar thing where it's like you could get in a car and you know that you're going something that could be walkable. It could be, but it's so hot that you're like, actually, we're gonna we're gonna take a car, and it would take us 4.5 hours.
Yeah,
and you're just sitting there and nobody's moving, and they don't move for 25 minutes.
And remarkably, they don't get too
nobody's mad.
Yeah,
nobody's mad at all.
Like if this happened outside of Manhattan, like there would be like
murders,
like literal war.
Like actual murder.
If I'm on 13 and I don't move for 2 minutes, I get furious.
It's a whole different level of patience.
All that development of my spiritual, it
goes
out the window right in front of this. But I'm like,
oh my gosh.
That's what Jeannie said the other day. I overheard her in class, and if you think you are anywhere near some sort of enlightened state, reflect on how you behave when the grocery store changes where things are.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think Wegmans is still doing it. And at one point, I was getting so mad, I just like stopped. And I just started like giggling to myself like the Joker. I'm just like,
don't know where this is.
It's like a dangerous laughter.
This isn't supposed to be here.
Nothing matters anymore.
I mean, that's kind of the nice thing about merging martial arts with your kind of spiritual practice is that you can kind of like work
physically
with that.
work
It's like,
out.
no matter whether I'm in a Zen place or not, I am the aggressor in this situation.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Talk about acupuncture. Now, I'm going to say I don't know much about it. Got to be honest with you. I don't think I know anything about it other than it looks like it'd be ouchy with the little needles. That's all I know. But Jeannie, who has gone to you several times, swears by it and has never not felt better afterwards.
Yeah.
So like, please elaborate, please discuss. Like tell me more about this because I know very little.
Me too. I'm in the same exact place.
Yeah.
Acupuncture is definitely, it's funny because becoming an acupuncturist, starting that process about 20 years ago, it was super alternative and not really, it was the kind of thing where, licensure had begun in the United States at that point, but it was still new enough that like no doctors were referring to it or, insurance companies paying for it.
Yeah.
And so in the 20 years I've been a practitioner, it's gone from this incredibly obscure kind of alternative, very fringy type of thing to basically being an accepted medical modality.
Yeah.
And so that's one element of it, which is really cool, is the sort of evidence-based buildup that's coming out of Harvard mostly. They have a connective tissue research lab where they do a lot of acupuncture research, so all kinds of new mechanistic evidence. So on one note, it's just a really cool time to be in that field because it's like right, in the forefront of medicine right now. So acupuncture is a traditional Chinese medical practice that's been around for a good solid 4,500 years extant in writing.
Yeah.
But it was around, like when you see the first writings about it, they're writing about it as a complete medical sort of a thing. So that means it existed for many.
Before that.
And ironically, coming full circle, it was the Wu who probably developed it. So boom,
that's
this
incredible.
all ties together, baby.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was
I
the
love
Wu
it.
Clan, so.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Of course
so,
it is.
Of course.
so the first transcribed sort of tortoise shells that have descriptions of Chinese medicine principles and acupuncture on them are, I believe, like 4,500 years old. You have a book called The Yellow Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine, which is really fully formed medical theory with acupuncture prescriptions. It's not like a some really, really basic theory idea that then informed the development.
Yeah.
No, it was like fully formed medicine already at that point. And it probably was compiled, the way a lot of texts are, where it was, probably added to over hundreds of years.
Right.
But still, I mean, that was like about 3,500 years ago, something like that. And then China never had really a dark age. Like once in a while, an emperor would burn everything down. But for the most part, Chinese medicine was continuously developed, documented, written about, practiced for thousands of years,
Without any serious gaps in like the record keeping.
No.
Right?
And like they had epidemics. Like there's a particular classic that it's called Wenbing, or warm disease theory. And it basically describes like Ebola, so like the doctors were seeing pretty much anything you can think of on earth. China has writing about it, when it comes to like, they're just a continuous civilization that wrote down everything a lot. And so the development of acupuncture as a medical practice has evolved and continues to evolve, which is really cool because like they don't sort of just stick in one place with it. When MRIs were developed, almost immediately the Chinese were like, all right, let's look at like what MRIs and acupuncture do. Let's look at fMRIs, and so they're always evolving the understanding of the medicine, keeping what works while adopting new theory.
Man, while we in the West are talking about balancing the humors for who knows how long.
Oh my gosh.
You have too much yellow bile.
I mean, a lot of Chinese medical theory is sort of similar ideas where it's like there's very much these I think that they're like empirical observation based things. So it's like, and a lot of it's very naturalistic because they never put it in like Latin,
Right, yeah.
So like if you have redness, swelling, heat, pain, the signs of inflammation from, some kind of a strike, the Chinese call that damp heat. And then they describe the location it's in. So it's very like practical, if you feel chilled and you're sick and like your nose is runny, they'll say, oh, you got a wind cold on you, you got a wind cold in you. And so that kind of naturalistic, descriptor, it gets in the way sometimes because it's not modern sounding, but it's always very practical. Like they're not like making stuff up. You know?
Yeah. So with the practice of the needles, right? Now, what is like is it like meant to stimulate a meridian, or like is that kind of?
So the traditional sort of channel and collateral theory of acupuncture is one where there are these pathways of predictable function along the whole body. They run up and down and all around the body.
Is that like meridian?
Yeah, exactly. And when you insert an acupuncture needle into they're called wells. So they're, we call them points in English, but they translate better to well. And so it's like an area where there's this accumulation of energy or a space where you can get at the energy on the channel. And really, like if I stimulate it, it's a predictable effect. So it's like we have these pathways of predictable function where I can do an input, a stimulus, and it will have a predictable effect on the body.
Now you're just using your hand. Can something here, is it like have anything to do about like headaches?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that's the command point of the face. So it works for frontal headaches.
Okay.
And it's interesting because it does work. Like if you stem that when you have like a sinus headache or you have like a headache that's kind of like facial, facial. If it's your posterior head and neck, there's a point where if you, the easy way to find it is like you take your hands, make C's out of them, put the C's together, and then where your finger will fall on the thumb side of your arm, you can then press around and stimulate. That's the command point of the neck, the posterior neck. Okay. So there's different areas that predictably will relax.
I mean, I only knew that one because Jeannie will just like, I have a headache. Just give me your hand.
Give me your hand.
I have a headache. Stimulate it. And now I'm like, oh, because you want me to do this.
Yeah.
Another popularized one is the one on your wrist that has C bands for it. If you get like motion sickness, you can put the little band there.
Yeah.
A lot of people have picked up various acupuncture points, but they're almost always in the medicine practiced where it's like you're creating a point prescription. And so there's a lot of elegance in the way you can select points. And so it's not often that we'll do like a 1-point solution to something. Usually we have to treat multiple channel systems. And then you're also operating within modern evidence-based stuff. So it's like a lot of what I do in a given day when I'm treating pain, it's like I'm thinking about your piriformis muscle. You know what I mean? I'm not like, okay, I'm going to balance the chi. And you'd be like, no, I'm like, your piriformis is spasm. We're going to release it.
Got it.
So like PTs call it dry needling. But there's like basically now modern applications using acupuncture needles where they don't even bother thinking about Chinese medicine at all. They're just sticking needles in trigger points and it works great. I mean, it's not as good as Chinese medicine, I think, but
That's so interesting because I think about modern medicine in America is so, solution based, like in a way that is like, here's a drug.
Yeah.
Like here's a bunch of foreign components that we've made like to ultimately make us money, like overall. Yeah. And so it's like this kind of, and it's not based in like 4,000 years of history. It's like, there's like an interesting lack of integrity in that for me in a way. The drugs can work. Yeah, absolutely. Obviously. And at the same time, it's like sometimes, just even the newness of it all is like a little bit shocking in a way. And it's just so interesting to think of a medical practice that is so based in empirical, historical evidence in a way that
it's very cool
now spreading. Well, it's like, and the fact that it's coming here now, it's because it works. It's true. And
let me tell you, if it didn't work, I don't think people would come back. Right. Because it's not like, oh, this felt great. Right. I mean, it can. Like sometimes it feels nice, but for the most part, like most people are a little bit reticent to have you poke them with a sharp object. Definitely. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it's like one of those things where it's like the proof really is in the pudding with Chinese medicine. Cool.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's like another, as Josh was speaking, it's like, it seems more like systemic where it's like treating, it's not just like so localized where it's like, okay, here's, if you're presenting pain or something, it can be treated in many locations, points, right? And it's not like, the best example I could think of, it's like if you have a tight back, it's like, oh, it's not just your back, it's probably your glutes and your hamstrings, right? Similar in that where it's like there's not just one thing to do about it, like it's
totally
more of a system change or address it that way.
When you look at sort of the model, I'm not like, please don't get me wrong, I'm not like anti-Western medicine or anything like that. But like if you look at the model as it exists in America right now, it's clearly disease-based.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, oh, you got a broken thing, we're going to fix it, you know? And like sometimes, thank God for that. If I got hit by a bus, I'm not going to me.
Yeah,
like I'm going to the ER, Like if I have a heart attack, thank God for that model, you know? Infection, thank God for antibiotics. We have antibiotics in Chinese medicine that, kind of work, but like you could take a real antibiotic and smoke it out, so I think there's a sort of a utilization for all different types of medicine, but Chinese medicine is definitely very much a truly holistic sort of a understanding of the body, and that we call symptoms branches, and then we call your constitution the root. So it's like you didn't get the symptom out of nowhere. It always has some combination of your root sort of constitutional proclivities towards stuff combined with a stimulus that created a problem somewhere. And we try to treat both, because if you don't, it'll just keep coming back. You know? Like think about it, if you got like a inflamed shoulder, so we talked about that's like maybe you got damp, heat, obstruction in the shoulder. So it's red and it's swollen, it's hot. They'll give you a cortisone shot, and that's great. Like it really works. Like cortisone totally works.
Right.
If they get it in the right spot and everything, you're like, sweet.
Okay, cool. Awesome, let's go.
And then like a month later, when the cortisone wears off, it's like deteriorated more.
Right.
Whereas if we were to do the same thing, we'll also try to uninflame your shoulder. We're going to clear heat. We're going to reduce swelling. We're going to try to remove the obstruction. But we're also going to look at sort of like, why is your shoulder bunched up there? What's causing friction? Why are you, like, is it how you're using your arm? Is it
Yep.
how you're sleeping at night? You know,
Right.
and that's a very Chinese approach to that.
Do you feel like as acupuncture and Chinese medicine is becoming more studied in the United States, do you feel like it could continue to break through to like all different specialties, like where it's like the holistic approach to treating a patient, not just the symptom, is like, do you see that growing? Because that sounds so valuable to combine the two. like it seems like a very sensical, like it sounds like a great path forward to combine like the wisdom and the two approaches.
I mean, if you look at China, that's totally what they're doing. You know, like China. So like I was in a neurological unit of the hospital in China, and you would get in any one day there, if you came to that hospital with a stroke, stem cell injections with like real stem cells.
Yeah.
I mean, don't ask them where they got them.
Right.
You know,
like, they got the gloves off in China for that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, they're very liberal. Let's just put it that way. Like where they get their stem cells from. So you get stem cell injection, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, a clot buster drug through IV, and then acupuncture like 3 times in that day. That's day 1 of your stroke care.
Wow.
Now, I'm not saying like, oh, if I get sick, I want to go to a Chinese hospital. I mean, there are also like doctors smoking in the bathroom. You know, like there's ups and downs wherever you go.
Right, of course.
But like there was definitely like a real integration there that was very cool to observe. And so in America, I see a lot of doctors that are trending that way. I think that medical doctors have it tough because they often either have to go completely off the reservation, no insurance, you know, doing their own thing. And usually they probably better be in a big city if they're going to do that. And then they might, you know, like think like Andrew Weil or Deepak Chopra or somebody like that,
Breakthrough with a private practice.
Yeah.
Like,
and like they become a huge celebrity when they do this.
Right.
Or, you know, you're playing ball, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't afford not to. You have like $250,000 in debt.
Exactly.
You know, like,
got to play the game.
You know, every doctor I've ever interfaced with wanted to help people. You know what I mean? I've never met a doctor that was like,
there for the money, right?
I'm going to get rich.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there are faster, easier ways to get rich than this.
For smart people, especially. Yes.
You know, it's like, so like, and then they feel themselves, you know, kind of crushed under the wheel of the machine that our healthcare
insurance companies
industry
and all
is.
that. Yeah, right.
And so they're just as sort of eager to break that mold as anybody else is, but it's difficult. So, and they also, and this is a good reason that it's difficult for them, is they're very much bound to the molecular evidence base.
Yeah.
Like if I'm doing something and I'm wrong, worst case scenario is you kind of don't get better that day.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
If they do something and they're wrong, somebody could die. You know? And so they're, biomolecular evidence base operates as like a warrant to do stuff. And if they don't have that biomolecular evidence base, then they don't have a warrant to do what they want to do. And they might well want to do something for you, but they can't. They can't justify it. If like somebody went back and looked at that chart, and it's like Dr. So-and-so did this when the standard operating procedure was to do that, they lose their license. They potentially get jailed. You know?
Okay.
So there's a lot of conflicting things. What I do see though is like functional medicine practitioners are very much starting, and these are often MDs, nurse practitioners, you know, these are like Western medical professionals. And they're looking at things within a very holistic yet biomolecular approach. You're seeing a lot of acupuncturists take on functional medicine training. I think you see it in some of the more like off the sort of, you know, MD-DO range. So like DCs, chiropractors, a lot of them have scope of practice enough that they can like sort of, you know, for better and for worse, sometimes the stuff they're doing is maybe a little bit less evidence-based than, you know.
Right, totally.
Like, but I think that urge towards holistic, sort of integrative care is really strong in the medical world right now. And you are seeing a trend really away from like narcotic painkillers, for instance.
Yes.
Like when I first started my practice, somebody who was in less pain than, you know, like somebody we know was just a few weeks ago would have left that hospital on no doubt OxyContin and morphine.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like I saw it every day, people on OxyContin and morphine, like William S. Burroughs level of narcotic.
God. Yeah,
you know,
no, it's so true.
Like zoning, nodding off, you know, like I remember I was given OxyContin after I got a dog bite in like 2003 or something like that. I got bit by a dog and my hand got infected. And so they gave me a prescription for Oxy, like real easy. And I took one and I was like, ooh, I can make a habit out of this, baby.
Yes,
like
right.
I've got an addictive personality. So
yeah.
I was like, I better not use any more of it.
So good.
A little too
like,
good.
This feels fantastic. You know, I read Ender's Game again.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like high as a bat reading Ender's Game. And I was like, I should get bit by dogs every week.
Yeah, geez, where are the dogs at?
Oh my God, that's amazing. You know, I think we could make a cut with all these videos of just Josh and I making eye contact, being like, "Whoa!"
Wow. Yeah, well, it's very interesting to
that's
me because
amazing.
I do think I grew up in a way where my mom, I can remember, well, especially because I have psoriasis. And my family, it's my mom's side of the family, all of her brothers and sisters and her parents had it. And I'm the only one of my 5 siblings who has it. And so I've used so many different steroid creams and like horrible, like these things with terrible side effects that like never worked, and found a herbal Chinese medicine cream that really worked.
Oh,
like
okay, there you go.
worked better than anything I have, and it was 99 cents. I could order it on Amazon.
Do you know the product?
I don't know the name. None of it is in English.
I wonder
like
if it was,
on the front of it.
I wonder if it was 99 cream.
I think it is.
Yeah, 99
cream
cream is super effective.
Well, and so
like almost too effective.
Well,
I was like, what's in there? You know,
let me tell you. So I eventually, so she was like, Josh, you can't read any of this. Like, how do you even know how much of the the actual medicine in it is working, like, or what is even in it? And I was like, I don't care. I was like, I honestly don't care because it's working. And
if it works, it works.
And I
used
to have it on my face, like, and eventually you're just like, I have stopped going to dermatologists because of it. Like, where I'm like, every time I go, they either prescribe me a pill or a steroid. And I'm like, I don't want to be taking like a pill that could have side effects that are so intense. But then I looked up the product that I was taking, and it said this product is very dangerous because it's super unregulated how much of everything is in it. So you could get one tube that's like fully it's all just the active ingredient, and then another tube that has almost nothing in it. And so it's just like the herbal part of it. And so that is like, it's an interesting thing to learn, that there is holistic approaches that absolutely work, but they probably aren't 99 cents that you could buy on Amazon.
I'll tell you this is like, so when you look at Chinese medicine, a lot of people come, okay, so like, let's say you get a parasite from the lake, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people come to me and they're like, oh, do you have like an herbal anti-parasitic? And I'm sort of like, why? Why do you want an herbal anti-parasitic? I was like, if you have a parasite, get an anti-parasitic. Like, go to the hospital and get a proper anti-parasitic.
Right.
They're
Those
like,
work.
But they're like, but the Chinese medicine, I read it works. I'm like, yeah, it works great. But it's also just a toxic chemical that kills everything in your gut.
Right.
So if you're going to do that, why not use the regulated version of it?
Yes.
Like there's wonderful Chinese herbal medicine and wonderful Chinese herbal dermatology. Like that's one of the places where I think Chinese herbal medicine really shines.
Yeah.
That autoimmune conditions, Chinese herbal medicine shines.
That too.
And then actually, believe it or not, orthopedic injuries, external Chinese herbal medicine, which is something I specialize in. I love that stuff.
Cool.
Like kung fu medicine. Like you ever watch an old kung fu movie and the kid gets injured and the doctor's like wringing a towel over his leg? That's what got me into the medicine in a large degree.
So cool.
That is amazing.
But there are all kinds of stories of Chinese herbal products. This is less the case now because one of the things that's cool is if you get it from a Chinese practitioner or Chinese medicine practitioner, what we're going to use is a product that goes through a process that meets Australia's good manufacturing practice.
Got it.
Fun fact about America, we have no regulation on herbs
at
right. all. Supplements are
nothing.
not really
Supplements,
regulated.
exactly.
So as long as you use language correctly when you're selling them, like you could cut your grass, call it Josh's Magic Hair Tonic or whatever, and 0 laws are broken that day.
Yeah.
Alex
Jones. That's what Alex Jones does.
Yeah.
Alex Jones is like selling stuff on his shows and stuff that is like totally like completely fake, like absolutely, and has been proven so. But people are just buying it, but you can sell it. It's not illegal.
It's not illegal.
So like voluntary mass spectrometry is one thing you want to look for when you buy an herbal product. Okay. Another is meeting either Australia or Germany's GMPs, good manufacturing practices.
Okay.
And then a third is using like reputable herb suppliers that are based in the United States rather than like, like Amazon or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's now happening is you're getting both Chinese knockoffs of products that are popular in America.
I think that's what I bought.
Yeah, which I mean, it's not that it won't work necessarily.
No, it's still got the active
but
ingredient, but
it may also have like corticosteroids in it. Like
Right.
I remember there was this fun pill back. This was at least a decade ago, and it was called Sea Dog pills, and it was for your like erectile dysfunction treatment. And the stuff just worked too well, like it's like any Chinese herb. Like if you're like, you're like springing a tadpole up the second you take it, like probably something's off.
Powerful in there, yeah.
And so somebody finally like blew this thing through a mass spectrometer, and it was just pure Viagra. So it's like, watch out where you get your herbs from.
Right? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my god.
So, like not an herb to be found in it.
Well, that is amazing.
Yes.
Oh my god. Well, I'm gonna say that I can almost guarantee that we'll talk to Bryan again at some point.
We gotta do this more.
I love to.
I got
be
1,000.
here.
Yeah.
This was fun.
Yeah.
This was awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. Especially like going home today, I'm just gonna like be thinking about and have like so many questions about not only like Qigong. Like, I'm definitely
definitely.
I don't know why. I mean, I know why because I'm busy, but like I know Jeannie's gone for a week, so I'm gonna watch some Qigong videos. Right
Yes,
now.
definitely. We got a plenty. We got a whole
Anytime
curriculum.
you guys want to party, I'm
That's
down.
right.
Definitely gonna check it
Let's
out.
do it. It's fun.
So for the first time, but not the last time, we have Bryan. This is Matt.
This is Joshua.
And I'm Bryan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.